The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. New York University did a new study about who is most likely to share fake news on Facebook. And what they found is that the older you are, the more likely you are to share fake news. Adjusting for education, sex, race, income, that is the factor, age, that was the best predictor above any other characteristic, even beyond party affiliation, as to who is going to be sharing fake news. Now, what's important to understand is that the fact that age more than party affiliation is a determining factor in who is more likely to share fake news does not mean that the fake news being shared is split 50-50 between left-wing fake news and right-wing fake news. At all times, the older Americans are more conservative than younger Americans. So we can adjust for political affiliation to isolate that age is the most important factor. That doesn't change that by virtue of being more conservative in balance, older people are disproportionately sharing conservative fake news by virtue of them being more conservative than they are liberal. I don't see anything surprising in any of this, Pat. I mean, I think it's, if you are someone who is on Facebook and doesn't fully understand the sort of minutia of how there are websites set up that look very much like real news websites or whatever else, it stands to reason that in the same way that older folks are more likely to fall for phishing scams from fake banks and scammers, that they would fall for fake news because it's a similar type of scam. It's trying to convince someone that something is something real when it is not.
Yeah, and the older folks, when they were in their younger years, they were watching Walter Cronkite and Tom Brokaw on television, and it was generally believed that you could trust what they have to say. Same thing when it comes to print journalism, right? If you were reading the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or whatever it was, you didn't have to think too critically about if the facts that they're reporting are true. You just could assume that they were. Whereas nowadays with social media and all these fake news websites out there, you really have to look at it with a skeptical eye. And, you know, many people in the younger generations, like my generation, we grew up with the internet, and we've had to have this intense focus on what we're reading and try to make sense of it, make an understanding of whether or not it's accurate. And I think it stands to reason that younger people do have better online media literacy right now.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty jarring. 11% of users older than 65 shared a hoax. Only 3% of users from age 18 to 29 did. Facebook users 65 and older shared more than twice as many fake news articles as the next oldest group, which is 45 to 65. And 65 plus shared nearly 7 times as many fake news articles as the youngest age group. Now, the one thing that you do have to address for is the degree of news consumption, right? Because the 65 plus group, I would assume they are reading more news than 18 to 29-year-olds. Maybe the difference isn't that significant. So that's another issue, which is if older folks in general are reading more news and sharing more news, that could influence the numbers as well. There are two theories as to why older folks are sharing more fake news. One is basically what Pat pointed out, which is kind of an online media literacy thing. People who came to the internet later in their lives are lacking some of the digital literacy skills that younger people have. The other is cognitive decline. That's actually cited by the researchers, that with some people, it just may be that it's not because they're getting it from the internet. If they got the exact same thing from TV, they might also believe it. It's just not as shareable. It's a cognitive decline issue. But I think that we're only talking about a fraction of those who are over 65. But those are the two theories advanced so far. Okay, we know that Colorado was at the forefront of legalizing recreational marijuana, and it has gone quite well so far. They are now considering the decriminalization of hallucinogenic mushrooms. This would not legalize the use or sale in Denver, but it would treat possession as the lowest law enforcement priority. Under federal law, psychedelic mushrooms are a Schedule I drug. That's like heroin or LSD or cannabis, by the way, which is still a Schedule I drug, which means they have no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. The Denver Police Department has been asked about this. They have not commented thus far because this is a city decision being carried out by the local legislators. The idea is hey, you know what? There is potential medical value here. We don't know exactly yet because there are more limited studies on that than on some other drugs. But we don't want to make this something that people can get in criminal trouble for. It would basically make it like a ticket in places like, well, the way it used to be in Massachusetts before we had full recreational legalization. They would be the first place in the country to do this. And is this the beginning, Pat? Is this the beginning of full decriminalization of all drugs?
I think it may be. Many would point to this and make a slippery slope argument, right? First, they legalized marijuana, and now they want to decriminalize magic mushrooms, maybe make that legal. Maybe next they'll make heroin and cocaine and fentanyl and all these other drugs completely legal. But that's always a bad argument. You have to take a look at the merits. You have to isolate each drug and say, should this be legal? Should it be decriminalized? Does it have any medical uses? And I think when it comes to mushrooms, there is a case to be made that it should at least be decriminalized, and there are some medical uses for it.
Yeah, psilocybin, which is the hallucinogenic component in magic mushrooms, has been shown to help reduce cancer patients' depression and anxiety. In some studies, it seems to benefit alcohol and smoking addictions. It seems to benefit obsessive compulsive disorder. But the funny thing about it is one of the arguments against decriminalization or legalization of mushrooms is that the effects can be very unpredictable and doses vary widely, and you don't know when you're having a piece of mushroom how much psilocybin is in it. And then you realize, wait a second, if we actually did the decriminalization and legalization and regulation, we would be able to produce this stuff in a commercial way where we would know that stuff, and the results and effects would be much more predictable, and you get this vicious circle that's designed never to be broken out of until someone like the Denver City Council potentially says, hey, you know what? We're not going to do this anymore.
Yeah, at the very least, just like how marijuana should be taken off of the Schedule 1 list, mushrooms also should be taken off the Schedule 1 list. I've heard the argument made that because LSD and mushrooms like changes how you view the world, changes your perspective, that's why the government wants to make it the most illegal, I guess, the carrying the highest penalty. Because it's strange how those drugs that appear less dangerous to society are treated more harmful than, say, cocaine and meth and the rest of it.
Yeah, there's a definite inconsistency in the scheduling and in the law enforcement treatment and in the judicial system treatment. That's certainly not new. And we'll see what happens in Denver. There are a couple other spots, including, I believe, Oregon, that is considering, whoa, sorry, I punched my mic. Considering doing something with magic mushrooms, I believe in 2020, but we'll see if it makes it onto the ballot. Police in Arizona are looking for DNA samples from male staff members at a nursing home where a patient in a vegetative state gave birth. This occurred at a clinic in near Phoenix, Arizona. The center said that a warrant was served by police on Tuesday, and authorities are trying to figure out, understandably, how did a woman in a vegetative state become pregnant? She's reportedly been a patient at the facility for at least 10 years after she nearly drowned and entered a vegetative state. The chief executive of the corporation that runs this nursing home resigned as a result of what took place. And Phoenix police spokesman Sergeant Tommy Thompson said it was not known whether anyone has declined to give a DNA sample. The woman has not been identified. She reportedly gave birth to a boy on the 29th of December. The infant was not breathing when they were called to the facility, although both the mother and child are now recovering in a local hospital. This is absolutely disgusting, Pat. The family is obviously outraged. The relatives are saying that the child is going to be okay. There's a loving family there, and the child's going to be fine. But that there is potentially such rampant criminality and negligence that has taken place here. This is just a major, major story.
And the interesting thing is, if you really wanted to solve this crime, you could, I think. You just have to DNA test everyone who works in the hospital. Now, of course, that would infringe on people's rights. They can obviously give up their DNA voluntarily if they'd like to, but you can't force people into doing that. So I think the question is, I would imagine a majority of people would be willing to give like a hair sample to make, to make it known that it wasn't them who did this horrible act. But do you take those people who decline to give over their DNA? Do you make them suspects? Because I think those would be the people worth looking into.
Yeah, obviously they would be, right? If you have 1%, if you have 2 people who decline to give DNA samples and immediately lawyer up, that's obviously a huge red flag. The question is, can you use their unwillingness to provide a DNA sample to justify investigating them in a more invasive way? I don't know if there's anything in the law that would prevent that. I would hope not, because who wouldn't simply want to be cleared? They could make the case, you know, the reason I don't want to provide my DNA sample is because I don't want to incriminate myself for matters unrelated to this. Who knows what they have in their past? Who knows what matches could come up if someone who, I don't know, burglarized a home 5 years ago gives up a DNA sample, right? Like, so you can't convict them because they don't give up their DNA sample. But it's a question as to can you build a case against them that will succeed in court without that DNA sample? And I don't know what the answer is. I guess it depends on a whole bunch of stuff, including security camera footage and who knows what else is accessible.
Yeah, it sounds like a clever runaround. You know, you can't force people to give up their DNA, but if only a few people don't give up their DNA, then they become suspects. I think there's a good chance that the perpetrator will be caught because you only have so many people working in the hospital. You know, there's a chance that whoever did this came from the outside, but I don't think that's very likely. I hope this does get solved.
Yeah, I mean, that is a possibility, that it was a visitor or something like that, and then it would become much more difficult to figure out. But a vile and disgusting case, and I do hope that we do ultimately sort out what happened. That's it for the bonus show today. New program and much more tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.